Okay, a roll call, Debbie?
Councilwoman Carumba. Here. Councilman Purdon. Councilwoman Carr.
Here?
Mayor Steinmeier.
Here.
Councilman Corey.
Here.
Councilman Gibson. Councilman Forbes.
Okay, let's turn it over to staff.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just for the record, Councilmember Gibson and Councilmember Forbes are on their way here right now as we speak, but we will get started.
It's over here.
It's coming here.
At this time, I'm going to ask our Assistant City Manager, Matt Feeney, to walk us through our staff presentation on transportation capital improvements. What he'll be doing is providing a summary of all the projects that are in process, in planning, being planned, are under construction, and then there will be a few items we're going to be looking for some direction from council on and how to prioritize for our budget. As again, this is a workshop, so there are no final decisions that are being made at this point. This is for you to provide some feedback to us so we know where to prioritize during the budget process. This is the first of a series of workshops we're going to ask for regarding the budget. We're going to come back and ask for one regarding parks, all the park facilities, the city facilities, stormwater. So we're going to be asking for each of those to happen further discussion. So as we prepare for the upcoming budget.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm going to relocate to the podium here and use the special pointer that we learned about
Okay.
last meeting. So I'm going to start by going over, or in this presentation, talking at first about a lot of the multi-use path and sidewalk projects that we've had underway over the last year, and talk about really build on previous prioritization workshops and kind of point council to where I think we should consider new projects in the upcoming CIP based on the work that we've done and based on the activity that we see along these corridors. After that, I'll speak about the transportation initiatives in terms of roadways that we have going on, as well as other agencies. So the city has really been pretty busy over the last few years in enhancing new construction and enhancement construction of its bike and pedestrian facilities throughout the city. This map kind of illustrates projects that we have underway, as well as projects that have been previously discussed in our plans. I'll move on here, but notably the Terry Street corridor, we've been under construction. We completed the multi-use path earlier this year, and then just finished up a little gap in that pathway really just this month. So
It's a nice improvement.
thank you. So this is a zoom in. I think it was the last city council meeting, we approved the Imperial Shores project out here in the western part of the city. This is a corridor where there are no facilities currently. That's a large 8-foot sidewalk with curb and drainage improvement. It also includes, with Bonita Springs Utilities, a major utility line relocation to accommodate the city's infrastructure. So this one, will happen over the next 2 years. It'll move into construction, and it's already been authorized to that point by City Council. I mentioned the West Terry Street corridor. We just wrapped up this section earlier this year, and then we moved on to connect to the railroad and finish that out. So you now have a contiguous either 12-foot path from Edenbridge Court going easterly to Old 41, or an 8-foot sidewalk with buffering from the vehicular traffic. The areas I will kind of touch on as we move forward in this are where I think the city might consider and has had in our long-range plan, but areas to go next based on the activity we've done. We think Paradise Road as well as Old 41 are candidates, and I'll explain that here in a minute. In addition, where you see the navy-colored arrows, blue and gold, we're just wrapping up the Maddox Lane connection, the Cockleshell Sidewalk connection, as well as earlier, I think late last year, we completed a brand-new facility along Bonita Drive. So I want to go over the components when we talk about a multi-use path project or a sidewalk project that are pretty common here in Bonita Springs and that can make what appears to be a simple pathway really a fairly complicated undertaking for the city. And the number one thing we end up typically addressing is drainage. So whether it's a simple sidewalk or a big wide 12-foot pathway, we usually end up having to install some piped infrastructure. Here you've got some photos before and during of West Terry Street where, in order to get the width for the 12-foot wide path that we constructed here on the north side of the right-of-way, we really did have to reclaim this space and make it usable. And the way to do that is to install piping. Here you can see the scale of piping. It was quite a bit of pipe. It was 6,000 foot, more or less, a 30-inch pipe. Here it is strung out in preparation for being installed along there. Once you install that, you're given a much larger area of existing right-of-way that the city can then work to build these improvements on. And that's just really a key component. Here in the final picture, oops, this is a little off kilter. That pipe that you see there is really right along this green space here in the photograph, so if you can imagine that. So it allows for the landscaping to provide for the shaded pathway and the look and feel that the city has been implementing. Another key component, it takes a few forms. The most common is curbing, is physical separation. And that physical separation is in the form of some barrier, and it also can be in the form of vertical height and also landscaping. The physical presence of trees kind of deters folks from making an errant move and getting onto the sidewalk area. So here we're looking at West Terry Street, looking down towards Pine. This was the existing condition. You can see you had a bit of a paved shoulder, a little 18-inch utility strip, and then a 5-foot wide sidewalk. That condition, if someone has a vehicular accident, swerves to miss a squirrel, or has a flat tire, there's really nothing to deter that vehicle from moving on and into the pedestrian realm. So in a lot of our projects, we install curbing. Curbing serves two purposes in a lot of cases. It creates that physical barrier, but it also is a component of your drainage. So these ideas are kind of interwoven. The curbing gets the roadway water to a common collection point to get it off the roadway. But here you can see we're installing curbing just outside of this photo. And what that provides is the physical separation for the folks that are using it. I don't know if you can see in this photograph, this is right after school lets out. There is a large amount of folks that are using this corridor. This is the constructed facility. And you can see the curb lines here. This is actually a valley gutter, but that hard curb line is just beyond the photograph here, and you can see it's caused that physical separation. So these folks are further away from the motoring public than they were in the pre-constructed condition.
Good.
Another component, it also serves to provide that barrier, but it also serves some other functions, is landscape and hardscape. So what I mean by landscape is pretty, I think everyone understands, is trees, bushes, shrubs. Those are components that create an inviting walkway. They provide shade, in the Florida heat. And they also provide an aesthetic signature look for the city, in terms of how it moves forward and develops into the future. The hardscape is benches, trash cans, primarily. You can see them here in the photograph. These are the same ones that we've used in the downtown as well as the other West Terry Street project. And they serve a function. The trash gets taken out by contractor every day. so that we don't have litter issues. And the benches provide a respite for folks. Here, there's a third component that's kind of gone on here. Is this was an area that we kind of created a little pocket park. It's right off to your right here. So the sidewalk diverges around the existing bus structure, but provides kind of an inviting space for some park-lit feature. I believe the Art and Public Places Board is going to cite a sculpture just right in here. So you can see the improvement, the physical separation, the landscaping, the hardscape. Those are things when we talk about future projects that we're incorporating into each and every one in some way, shape, or form. So I mentioned in the beginning a couple of areas where we think the use and the activity that the city has implemented or is in the process of implementing, where we should address some potential gaps or for consideration by council. Here, you've got Old 41 Road. This is a highly used corridor. There are some large population centers along this corridor that utilize it to get to Terry Street, as well as into our existing downtown infrastructure. We've already built out Terry Street this year and last. As I mentioned earlier, we finished an 8-foot sidewalk with landscaping and curb project on Bonita Drive. In your CIP this year, we have design and construction in the following years for Rosemary Drive to the north. And we are under a design contract for Goodwin Street here along the south side. So you can see this network is filling in, and this is a common theme that we use not only in pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, but in roadway transportation. The more network, the more connective points that you have, the easier it is for folks and vehicles to get around. So one of the gaps we feel based on the amount of activity is really here on Old 41 north of the roundabout to Rosemary Drive. It is not in your CIP. It has been in our plans, as an area for improvement. What those improvements would look like would be up for, development here within the city, but we think it's something that should probably be considered and would finish out this east-west, north-south corridor. In addition, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the governor coming down and giving us $16.8 million for East Terry Street, which starts right there and progresses to the west. We will be developing a drainage and pedestrian, improvement program along that corridor. The corridor runs all the way to Old 41. There are facilities here in the first stretch of East Terry to Imperial Parkway, but those dollars would be available for considering improvements that address drainage as well as bike ped infrastructure. So you can see, with the money that's coming, with the things that are already under design, in our CIP, this is kind of the logical last little gap for this highly trafficked area. Similarly, we are wrapping up 2 connective projects. One is along Maddox Lane. This is a photograph of it here. It's an 8-foot sidewalk with curb. There was drainage underneath the sidewalk system and some repaving. And then down here in the south along Cockleshell Road, a connection to existing sidewalks along Shangri-La. So this sidewalk's now poured if you were to go out there today. These are largely wrapping up. But what's going on here in this neighborhood is you have a lot of active folks. Every time I'm out there are folks walking to enjoy the day or walking for exercise or going from point A to point B. But there's a lot of activity. There was a lot of demand for this connection point, as well as for Maddox Lane in years past. And really the infrastructure along Paradise Road, although there is a sidewalk on the west side of the road, it's a 5-foot sidewalk. You have some open drainage conditions through here. And based on the volume of folks that are here and the activity, it really is a logical place to look at some multi-use path infrastructure and improvements, probably similar to what occurred along Terry Street. We did look at it in the previous cycle of kind of evaluating projects. It just, we didn't have it up with some of the other ones that have now been implemented. So it seems like it's, time to be looking at that corridor. Now I'm going to shift gears and talk about the major vehicular initiative that we have going on here at the city.
Could I just ask something before we shift gears?
Sure.
Is that all right?
Yeah, go ahead.
What, is lighting considered in all these aspects?
It is, and the best example is this. This is West Terry, the earliest piece that we did, the 12-foot path. Part of that project is the electrical lines are going underground from Pine Avenue to Eden Bridge. So the first segment that was constructed. If you've driven the corridor, you may have noticed it's, there's directional drills every other week out there. If it isn't Comcast, it's FP&L drilling the conduits in to support that undergrounding. When those poles go underground, so do your existing FP&L streetlights. And so here we've been under a design contract, I think since late in the fall. And we have a designer that's designing streetway or roadway lighting, decorative lighting, that'll basically be matching to some degree what we have in the city system already running along this corridor at a more human scale, not 40 foot in the air.
Mm-hmm.
So that's under design and will be falling in, as the power comes underground. In other cases, where we're going to keep the poles above ground, no, street lighting's not, it exists along the existing grid. We did include it in the concept here. We haven't solicited designers for Rosemary yet, but it is included in this corridor along Rosemary. There was existing lighting along the FP&L infrastructure on Bonita Drive, so it's kind of situationally dependent, but it is one of the components that we look at. Typically, like I said, the big ones that are addressed always with these drainage almost out of necessity to get the right-of-way usable, landscaping to create the environment that's encouraging for folks to walk, and then provides that separation, and then the curbing where applicable to keep people.
Because this area that is right pulled up, at night, there's a lot of folks that ride their bikes.
Yeah, there is existing street lighting there. It was put in 1999. You can see one here. We do have some plans, long-term to upgrade that to LED as well. We're upgrading everything to LED at this point.
Thank you, Matt.
So transportation, vehicular transportation, I mentioned grid network. That just means more roads, more options for folks to utilize, so that you take the pressure off of the existing infrastructure. If you're not looking at that, you're probably looking at more lanes, right, and widening roads, and roads can become barriers for some of the things that I was showing just a few minutes ago. So the city has been working for some time with FDOT and really with our own consultant and the landowner, primary landowner here to the north, or landowners. This is the Publix is located here. This is a shopping center that at the corner of US 41 and Bonita Beach Road, the northwest corner. We entered into a settlement agreement. We developed what is called the Quadrant Plan. It identified the need for a new roadway across from Windsor to US 41. The purpose of that roadway is to divert existing left-hand turning movements, folks coming off of the beach that are turning north, and essentially there isn't enough capacity for them to store here, and it creates additional traffic congestion at the intersection. So the concept is to get folks diverted and move them along a new roadway that then allows them to proceed north and kind of spreads that congestion out over the length of the roadway. We've been working for some time, as I mentioned, through a settlement agreement. We closed on the property, the primary pieces of property, December, Derek, I think?
Yes.
December of this last year, and we're internally right now, we have a design RFQ for engineers, and it'll probably be coming out by the end of this month for advertisement. So we will be coming back to you a couple months from now, with a recommended designer to design this road. FDOT is aware of this, and I'll move on to the next part here in a minute, but we have $7 million currently in our budget allocated for the construction of this roadway. So we're moving to design and then ultimately construction. It had been held up with property acquisition, and we turned the primary corner with that in December of this year. So I'm going to go back to this slide in a second, just for illustrative purposes. This is my last kind of slide. I mentioned I'd talk about other activities that are underway here in the city. There are two large studies that have been undertaken by the Florida Department of Transportation. One is for the US 41 Bonita Beach Road intersection, which I was just talking about, and the other is for the Old 41 Bonita Beach Road intersection. So I'm gonna move back here. The FDOT PD&E study is looking at, in addition, they're aware of this idea, and they know that the city is moving forward with this, and they see benefit to it. But in addition to that, there are other issues. There are left-hand turning movements that are stacking up, going to the east, southbound to eastbound. And so they're looking at ideas to try and improve the flow of this intersection in addition to just this one concept. They have additional ideas that are complementary. They're working on bringing those to the public in the form of a public meeting. And the city has been adamant in working through that discussion. I think you all are aware of this, in articulating that the city really is interested in at-grade. That means no flyovers, at-grade solutions. So there are ideas that FDOT is looking at that are at-grade, that would not, necessitate the need for a flyover, because it's not really context sensitive here in this issue. The public meeting was actually scheduled for April 14th, but FDOT has kind of taken another hard look at how their plans fit into forthcoming development plans, and they've realized that they really need to take some more time in the ideas before they present them to the public and refine them. So right now they've asked that be kind of rescheduled. They haven't given me a firm date, but they're looking towards the winter of 2023. We've articulated to them that these workshops really need to happen in season when we get the largest amount of input. So they're being sensitive to that. The other PD&E actually will be held on public input meeting will be held on April 14th at the city's rec center, 5 to 7 o'clock. FDOT has essentially swapped this one in for the US 41. Now they want to talk about Old 41. The Old 41 PD&E, which I've got an image of how it affects the city, is from Bonita Beach Road south to the Collier County line. And it actually has a complementary PD&E in Collier County that carries from the Lee County line all the way to US 41, where Old 41 Road reconnects. So these are both happening concurrently. It is the same consultant working through FDOT. Both of these PD&Es were instituted around the same time, pre-COVID, and they have really been affected by the pandemic, the progress of them. But they have, breathed new life into them, and they're finally to the point, that's the so what point, so to say, with these public input meetings. So this one, really what they're looking at, and I don't want to take away all their thunder, is some additional lanes as you coming up out of Collier County, but they're looking really at a new roadway, which is expanded roadway network, before you get to the intersection of Old 41 and Bonita Beach Road. And at that point, the additional lanes would peel off. And so folks coming up wanting to go eastbound would follow a new roadway corridor over to Racetrack Road and on to the east. The key point there is that this little section would not be widened. One of the things that the city has suffered from, I started talking about roadways here earlier and saying either you build new roads, right, or you widen roads. Well, if you widen them and continue to widen them, they get to a point where they are a physical barrier for people that are walking or biking or crossing by other means. And they literally, stop folks in that type of activity from moving through, and they really start to define the nature of your community. A road that is that wide, an intersection that wide, is really a pass-through. And so here, the city's perspective has been to keep that intersection narrow and provide folks with other alternatives that alleviate the congestion, and that's the case here. We budgeted in this current year's budget some monies to assist with this project with FDOT to assist in right-of-way acquisition as this stuff becomes more firm and they hold their public meeting and move on into actual project development. That's really what I have.
I did want to clarify one thing is, originally on an agenda item, City Council approved the workshop to be held by DOT because it's an intergovernmental workshop. It was approved as an agenda item. I believe we have direction from council to just swap that. I didn't think that needed to be an additional agenda item for the future so that they can start their advertising and promotion of the workshop. As long as you are comfortable with that, staff would approve the swap of the two topics.
Same date, same place?
Same date, just different roadway. Same date, same time, different roadway.
Literally all you do is add
You need a,
old to the road name.
right. Do you need a motion or just?
No,
Okay.
we wanted to make you
Just gonna go
aware
ahead,
for
yes.
transparency that was a vote. So we feel that from the original vote, we had enough direction to authorize that. So they will begin their promotions, which they'd like to start here shortly, so.
Okay, very good.
Great.
I do want to point out, this very much it's a joint, you have two studies for one road in two different jurisdictions. And I think that they have, from what I've seen and from what they'll present, they have worked very hard to be respective of the work that the city of Bonita Springs has put in terms of its planning. There's been a lot of planning that has shown these areas. We passed comprehensive plan amendments that said anyone developing here needed to consider roadway expansions. We entered into a lengthy lawsuit over those changes, which ultimately led to the settlement in the other intersection. And we provided all of that information to FDOT, as well as the planning that Tool Design had done and the planning that DPZ had done. And they really worked to try to blend two concepts. I think down in Collier, there's more of a concern about moving folks through that corridor, and rightfully so. And I think you've got a fairly fair compromise that's going to be shown that shows that additional capacity coming up and then diverting into a new quadrant roadway as well in that intersection.
But the other real problem is the bottle. I'm sorry.
What was that? Yeah.
Yes.
Let's move along here.
Well, I'm finished. I think the big takeaways here, the roadway things are really updates as to where we are. We're moving along, and we're starting to move much faster on this now that we have the property. Here, our recommendation really would be that you consider probably this gap of Old 41 and Paradise Road for major improvements along the pedestrian side of things in terms of multi-use paths and landscaping and facilities.
Adam Botana lives on Forester Drive. Do you have any information about Forester and the flooding there? And they got 50 ducks living on their street. So.
I don't know about the ducks, but Forester is in our current year's CIP. We do have an engineering firm developing a plan to address the ponding that's going on there, and it doesn't have any drainage infrastructure, so we're trying to figure out how to get the water off the road without a robust, without an infrastructure that requires an exceptional amount of permitting, new permitting. So they've been out there, I think they were out there right after the first of the year doing quite a bit of survey work, and I haven't seen any draft concepts yet back, but it's being worked on. I guess the short answer is it's being worked on. Signed a bill for it. It's being worked on.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Chris?
Matt, with the old 41 Bonita Beach Road planning that's going on and I know it's a sensitive topic for people, but is there any concept of being able to do it in such a way to relieve downtown of, like 18-wheel trucks that are using old 41 as a bypass to 41 to get up north?
I don't, I just brought it to this, you're talking about Old 41. That really, the project stops right at our, the start of our downtown, so that there really hasn't been much thought. I mean, the thought here is probably anyone coming north trying to head to the interstate would dogleg over on this.
Right.
So to that degree, but they've really been focused on trying to meet the needs coming out of Collier. Collier has some interesting parallels here, where veterans comes across, and this study I think will help with, and I don't want to speak for their stuff too much, but I think it will help with a better connection point down there at Old 41, which will help Bonita, because it'll help with another east-west road. Here in our realm, they've really looked at our planning work and the steps that we've taken, and they really have paid off in both of these studies, I think. The comp plan amendments, to try and recognize that the city is looking for improvements, but improvements that really address the context. The shortest answer I can give you is we're doing our annual traffic counts. We're getting ready to. And I did ask our consultant to get some classification data, which is a fancy term for trucks, through the Old 41 corridor, because that information will help, with what you're talking about if we look for anything in the future. So we're going to take advantage of the season, take advantage of the fact that we're already counting traffic, and get an understanding of how many trucks are moving through that corridor.
Thank you.
Were you gonna have a traffic light there at Bonita Beach Road and that new road?
It's already there. That's Racetrack Road.
Racetrack Road, and isn't that road already in the plat?
If this was a laser pointer, I would point it at your city attorney. I don't know where he went, but that road, this much, almost, you see the bend here, and I don't want to take away too much from FDOT's work, but this stretch, I believe, was in the county's, literally Lee County's receivership. And Derek had brought that issue to you, and I hope you correct me if I say anything wrong, but he brought and received direction from council some time ago to work with Lee County to get that transferred over. So this stretch here to the bend, I believe will be transferred. I think the county was willing to do so. I'm certain they were. I don't know where Derek is with the technical side of that process. I know he brought it to council and received direction to move forward with it.
And the east-west section, isn't that platted in there? Is that
No. That would be acquisition from the landowners, and we.
But I believe it was part of the zoning condition that there would be an opportunity for land acquisition through that development. So we didn't actually design the road or plat the road yet. That would continue in a conversation as you move forward, so that we'd have the opportunity for acquisition. But it was a requirement of this rezoning.
Okay, thank you.
But any land that we would acquire there, we would need to compensate the landowner that we live in America.
It would be very similar to the process that we went through for the other quadrant, where we'd work through their development and work for the appropriate acquisition.
This work, and I know you're just looking at a postcard, but this work showed value to that roadway, and if you come to the meeting, you'll see that. It addresses a lot of the needs. There were some requests from communities down here. I think it does a very nice job of addressing those requests. The city will have to be a partner. We started to budget for it. But this process allows FDOT to start to bring some federal funding and state funding to it as well. So the city will be a financial contributor. We have budgeted money, but also we'll be working with them and their money too.
And that'll take some of the pressure off of that intersection with Bonita Beach Road and Old 41.
Yeah, and,
I
and
agree.
hopefully give you an opportunity, in the future, if you want to, make that more of an entrance feature. I don't know what that would look like, but
Well, if you're coming up, you take a right and you go out to I-75, you don't have to go.
the more lanes you put in there, the harder it becomes to be an entrance.
Time all the different lighting, yeah.
I have a question. Are there going to be any lights added from Bonita Beach Road on Old 41 to 41?
Went from Old 41.
Bonita Beach Road on Old 41, going then into Collier County. Any lights?
So I don't want to give up all of the information that they're looking at, but if you attend, I think that both on the east and west side, the concerns of the communities there are very well addressed.
This is off in the future, okay. Okay, anything,
They're looking at lights at both intersections.
Arlene?
Yes, so I think we would be looking for some, of course, this isn't a voting opportunity, but some direction on the recommendations that staff has made regarding next steps, so we could be looking to create budget items for them in the next CIP. Also, at this point, if there's any other roadway that you did not see mentioned that you would like us to take a look at, all this would be important in putting any preparation together and planning for the budget.
I prefer Old 41 north of Terry Street up to Rosemary to make that a nicer area, safer area.
I think, the last time we really moved through a suite of projects. So Terry Street was put in. I think the second time we talked about the little gap was added. Bonita Drive was put in. So, we're not asking, it doesn't have to be one or the other. I think when we come to budget time, you can look at the timing of those. So the work that was done really at the last large prioritization, it's taken, I don't know, 3 years to manifest itself. We understand, Mr. Mayor, but if you want both, at this point, it's really not an issue for us.
It's not exclusive. What we would look to do is place in out years. It's just the prioritization, but we wanted to start the budgeting process, so even in an out year, we can place a placeholder and move forward, and then it becomes part of the priority list.
Mayor?
Yes.
I'm in favor of completing the interconnections that you show on this plan that's up here. I think it's important to complete those kind of networks down there, especially the downtown area. So everything you presented, I think you should incorporate it in the CIP, and then you could figure out what the timing would be so that we could afford to do it in some kind of sequential way.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I did not mention, and it's just a failure of my presentation. This Dean Street is in your long-range plan. It's in your long-range CIP. These other two with the red dots, that's Shangri-La Road, and this is Pennsylvania, are not. So those, I put them for long-range consideration. We can add them at no financial impact, but communicate the need.
Correct. Some of the things we do is we put placeholders out of the
Exactly.
financial, where it does not affect the actual budgeting process, but then they're accounted for on the CIP and out years.
I think you have to put them on the list, even if they're not current.
Yeah.
Because we're implementing the bike pedestrian master plan. That's what we're doing, and you're doing a good job. We have to do a little bit, we have to do it continuously. That's my opinion.
I would agree with that, Amy.
And
Go ahead,
actually, you're increasing mobility and connectivity, you're adding to safety and reducing congestion, so I think it's great.
Okay.
I just have one more question. I know sometimes, we have these little projects, which don't seem like a big project, and they're not part of the master plan. How do you do that? I mean, if somebody wants to come and say, can you work on this, how do you, would they be, if they're not on the list, they can't get on the list, or how do you do it?
Let's see, I'm gonna go back. I can give you a couple of different answers to that. So I'm trying to find a better schematic. One example, and you may remember, I think you're on council, Maddox Lane came from folks just directly. I think they came to a council meeting and asked, and they found a council sponsor that said, can we look at that? Council voted, and we moved it forward. It wasn't in the CIP, and we moved it forward that way. Other types of projects that aren't necessarily these, I mean, this is one thing. This, the definition of this is a much larger project. And so, even though this is much smaller in distance, this is a complicated project. This will be very complicated in terms of access management, what you do with the road, and really getting feedback and input. They're not simple. Projects that aren't of that nature, particularly if they're roadway. A good example is the Terry Street roundabout. The improvements we're going to do there. It came up from Councilman Corey. We looked at it with an engineering firm. There's some engineering work they're doing now, but that's on track. We'll move. You won't hear about it again unless the construction dollars are over $50,000, which they probably will be. But the funding is available for something like that through some CIP items that allow us to deal with roadway drainage and sidewalk improvements. There's an item called minor roadway drainage and sidewalk improvements. Don't let the minor moniker fool you. Those are $200,000 projects. Or run the range of things like that.
There's some process by which these things can be addressed.
There's opportunities. If there was a petition to council, it brought forward as a green sheet, what we would do is look to the funding sources we currently have. Does it meet the criteria for gas tax? Does it meet the criteria for impact fees? Or is it general fund? Present those options to you as what the cost is, and then you could prioritize that within the budget. It'd possibly be a budget transfer, but if it's a huge safety issue that's been noted, we have a way of addressing that during the year.
Okay, thank you.
Particularly if you and almost everything we're doing needs some design work. And so if you come to us or someone comes to you and you want something incorporated, it needs some design work, and it isn't that large. You can roll it in, and we can start to tackle the design work over the fiscal year and then figure out the game plan.
And also that might lead us, depending on where it's located, if it's in the census tracts of community development block grants, if it's a smaller dot, there's opportunities for us to match it with a particular grant too. So the most important thing is the design work first, so we know what the cost is, and then we can see through that criteria where it can be funded.
Okay, thank you.
Since the governor was so nice to come down and grant and give us some money, what are the particulars on East Terry Street? What are we limited to, or is there any flexibility there, or can you give a little explanation and we'll go forward with this?
Let me get to a map. Boy, that map did not show up well. I made these maps, and I'm a little disappointed.
Yeah, that's Terry Street.
There is a line. You can't discern it very well, but from Old 41 to Bonita Grand Drive. So to answer your question, Mr. Mayor, that's the first, constraint is we can't go beyond that. So, for example, in our
East and west.
In our CIP, we had residents that asked for a sidewalk on the south side of West Terry Street. We put it in our CIP. We're actually going out to solicit designers here. I just approved the solicitation, so it's probably go out by next week. That'll take a couple of years because it requires right-of-way, but the governor's money really probably can't cross the line there and deal with that project. We already have it budgeted. It's not an issue, but it's just an example. This project does have to address drainage issues. So it allows for the pedestrian. I don't want to frame it that it's a pure pedestrian project. It's not. It's to help with drainage issues. And there are drainage issues in all parts of that corridor. In this section, there's some that manifested during the storm. There's some certainly here, which is from Imperial Parkway to the overpass. And then there are certainly some here. And so we'll have to run some hydraulic modeling and understand how we can help alleviate those drainage concerns. There's some infrastructure we've built, like the Pine Lake Preserve, that will probably help with that in the eastern stretch. But we'll have to look at those things, and we know where the problem areas are, but they'll become more manifest as you start to develop those computer models and look at different storm events and see what you can do to improve the situation. Beyond that, it allows for bike ped. I think the big question, the other thing really is, it is not to build a new overpass over the interstate. He didn't give you enough money to do that, but that's also not really in the scope. So we're going to have to be creative in looking at what can be done to make that pedestrian connection over the interstate, but understand that it'll probably be limited with that project. You'll need to look at something else to really address that long term.
We may be coming with an idea, as it's looked through, as whether or not we want to contribute some funds to that as well, as part of the branding and different ideas, so.
Okay, so it's a
But it would
drop
be-
in the bucket, so to speak.
This will get more refined. We don't have I showed it as, I don't know, for design or something, under design. This is in the most premature under design. We have to federally solicit the designers because it really is federal money that came down through the state. We'll work on that as we come into the spring and summer. And then once we get that designer on board, we work through the grants, we'll have more definition for you. But the simplest answers are, it really can't cross that line, can't cross this, it can't build you a new overpass, and it has to deal with drainage concerns within the area, which we're aware of.
It'll be an improvement one way or another. Yes.
To what degree, remains to be seen. I think the big question mark here, and probably just the big question mark here is, you have a formalized stretch of Terry Street that was built in 2006, and what improvements do you do there? Because that can be a challenging retrofit, and it could consume a lot of money. We don't know the answers yet, but that stretch and what improvements happen there will probably be driven by what the need is and the benefits to the east, and some kind of balancing act that we work through city council and through public workshops with.
Well, thank you, Matt. Very good. Great job. Can we adjourn?
Just a couple quick announcements. So from that, I'll be asking during the city council meeting if you would be considering to do another 4 o'clock workshop on March 2nd, and that would be Parks and Recreation. There is a little bit of an immediateness to that because Nicole has received her final cost estimates for the ball fields, so we do need to walk you through that as well. And the other item I'd like to address, if you're willing to hear in a future workshop, we would take this step by step, is we would like to talk about the opportunity during a workshop and then later on to bring it to council, is the discussion of the current pay ranges we have for all of our employees. Those have not been updated in 7 years. What we like to do, we're not going to ask for another, previously that was done through a human resources study. What we found is the positions we have are pretty unique. Not many cities have the assistant city manager also serve as the public works director and GIS coordinator. We also don't typically have a code enforcement director also in charge of emergency management, facilities and communications, and also additionally we have finance, who also is now taking on administrative services. So we're not interested in doing a whole new study. We just like to look at the cost price index, have a calculation that appropriately works for the 7 years, and look at the ranges. One of the things we've noticed in being competitive with our local jurisdictions is that some of the pay ranges that we have in place now, our mid-range is their starting range. So there is a little bit, of retention issues we want to make sure we're addressing. The other little bit different avenue that we have is we have so many long-time term employees who are successful in their positions, and at some point they will cap out of that pay range. And so being able to reward them for their merit pay and not have an issue of the capping of the pay range is something we want to look at overall. So if you're willing to entertain that, we would want to bring that as part of another workshop in the series, and let Lisa kind of take the lead on that and walk you through some different methodologies so we could get some feedback from you. We could then adopt the pay ranges, and later on through a process through budget time, we would look at how we would need to adjust that through the budget and what that would mean.
It's a very difficult thing to do.
Great. No.
Okay.
And that workshop would be when?
Well, first off, that we're talking about Parks and Rec workshop for March, to make your March 2nd meeting, which is already at 5:30, to start at 4 p.m. and start Parks and Recreation.
Okay. Anything else?
That's all we have for right now, unless there's any other questions of us or any other topics as part of the budget you'd
Conversation
like
up
us to
here.
address.
Amy, go ahead.
I was wondering, are we gonna have like a facilities management presentation? Because there's been, even at the Art and Public Places Board, there are things that are brought up in regard to what we're gonna do with the
Old library.
the old library, the sheriff's station, should we build something on the bioreactor, all this stuff, are we gonna put in a parking, they're all talking about, so, and just what our needs are for the city, so we could understand some kind of broad range, long range planning for
So part of,
what we have to look for in regard to projects. So I think
Correct.
we could do that in a workshop too.
correct, so part of the update, so each of the department directors will be giving an update on their CIPs and project goals for the, just as Matt did this one, he'll also be on stormwater as well, but Laura Taylor will be giving you an update on communications. There are some still features of communications in the CIP we're gonna be addressing, and facilities, we'll be asking for that discussion. And also, I think we might want to incorporate into that a discussion of the special events as well, so we can have an idea of how you would like some of those funding opportunities to flow as well. So we can incorporate that through all in one workshop, Parks and Rec in one workshop. I think we need one workshop dedicated to stormwater on its own, because that one,
Okay.
we would walk through each of the grant applications that we have as
Okay, now
well.
we have a public comment period.
Yes,
Oh, we do,
Any public comment on our workshop?
public leave.
No public comment? We ready to adjourn this meeting, come back at 5:30?
That's good.
Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you.